I'm sorry, I'm like bad with names. In League of Legends, Dragon in Castlevania, Phil in Crude's Family Tree, Codex in Monster High, and Heracles in Hades 2, along with many, many others in video games and various audiobooks and commercials and so much more stuff. He's a very accomplished stage actor who's appeared across the US and Europe. Let's please hear it for Matthew Waterson.
It's a long way up.
I know. And there's a traffic light?
Was that what that is?
Yeah, you just hit. I'll take that. It's supposed to be our timer.
Oh. I thought it was to tell us when to stop talking.
Sort of.
It is, right?
Red, be quiet.
That's what a timer is.
There, and now it'll tell us how long we have to talk.
All right.
Okay,
Time our answers.
so we're gonna start off with some Q&A. Matthew, Magneto was such an iconic role for the 90s. Can you tell us a little bit about how you found your voice for Magneto?
So one of the things when the auditions came for the show was that we got a packet that included video clips from the original show, and what they were looking for were a couple of things. They wanted one version where we were trying to match the voice as closely as possible, and then they said, you know, using the voice as a starting point, like, give us something else to sort of, you know, see what you might do separately. And then in the callback, they kind of followed on with that. They said, you know, one of the big things is that we need the show to feel, if you're watching the animated series and then go straight into X-Men 97, that you don't have like a record scratch moment of going like, that sounds weird. But also with a lot of characters, specifically with Magneto, they said, you know, he's in such a different place at the beginning of X-Men 97 than he is for the lion's share of the animated series, that we're giving him a different look, we're giving him a different outlook. Everything is sort of shifted for him as he attempts to fulfill Charles's wish, that we kind of want him to sound a little different while still sounding like himself. So the reality was I had to try and match David Hemblem, who had done him in the original show, as closely as I could, and then also bring in a little bit of different, something a little bit different just to sort of show the change. And to be perfectly honest, what I did was just steal little bits from Ian McKellen and Michael Fassbender, and add in a little bit of more of Fassbender's, because his was a little darker than McKellen's was, and that felt more appropriate for this iteration. So there were it was just a couple of bits here and there where I would sort of steal some of his cadence and some of his intonation to sort of fold into what David had done.
Okay. And Holly, did you find the same challenges, or was it a little bit different?
I think because I grew up like obsessed with X-Men, my identity, even before I knew that this reboot was happening, my identity was so like wrapped up in having grown up on it that it was like part of my DNA already. I think on the playground, like I always wanted to be Rogue, but I took my turns as like Storm and Jubilee also, and there were definitely like, you know, we're stupid little kids, like, but like, nuh-uh, that's not how it sounds. Like it's more like this. So like I've been preparing for this since I was 8, you know. But like, as far as voice match, because I didn't get the same packet, so the directive was just we're looking for a voice match, and then. When it's under code name and everything, but the clips are straight from Night of the Sentinels.
Yeah.
So like we know what this is. So so when I saw this, I was like in my movie, like, oh my god. Trying to do the voice match, which I know I can do because I knew I wanted to. The challenge was like make sure you're also like doing good acting, you know, when you do the thing. And then as I don't know about you, but once we were in sessions, they re-recorded episode 1 like a bunch of times while dialing in tone and how it was going to be different, and how it was going to be similar to the original series. And so they kind of like gave permission at a certain point of like, you know what, let's not be so beholden to the voice match. Let's just, you can, you know, sound like your own voice. And I don't sound too dissimilar naturally from Alzheimer, but yeah, that's what we landed.
And then she also stole from Michael Fassbender.
I will say, so episode 4, I have that line as Magneto. I wasn't played anything of yours. I sort of asked, like, I haven't heard the new guy. What is it? They're like, just do the original guy. So like, we watch it.
You don't want to hear it. Pick someone good.
But like when you watch it back, clearly I'm doing not you. Like I'm not imitating you.
Yeah.
You know?
So, were either of you, I mean, you already said that you were super into X-Men to begin with, but were either of you fans of the comics and show before?
Yeah, show obviously, and then because of the show, I'd say I was like 12, and like, I was like, oh yeah, the comic books and stuff like that. So then I started a collection, but like, if you don't have money, you don't have a job, you don't have an agency, it was just sort of like, people were like, oh, you like this, here. So then I ended with like a shoebox of some comics. So through those, like, I think I had one of the like Uncanny #1s, you know, where they had the duty to go rescue them in on like Krakoa. And so it was like gathering the team of like Storm and Nightcrawler and so I like those characters a lot. I would say I know enough to like fake my way through a conversation. I don't think if challenged I could really get into the intricacies of the comic plot lines.
Yeah, so when the original show was airing in the 90s, I was at a boarding school in England, so I didn't have access to it because I was effectively in child prison. But being a predominantly all boys boarding school, there were kids who had the comics, but nobody had a consecutive run. You would get individual ones, and so as I'm sure you all well know, the storylines, the characters, and their relationships, and whether they are considered an antagonist or a protagonist, vary a lot. So you'd go from one to the other and be like, I don't understand exactly what's happening, because that was a good guy and now he's murdering people, or these two people liked each other and now they hate each other. So you kind of had to take them as individual things, and so like I never really got into it as a world because of that sort of mixed part of it. The ones that people actually had consecutive runs for, and I don't know what this says, were more than like the 2000 AD stuff. It was like Judge Dredd and things like that. So for some reason, those were the ones that people had a run of. That may say more about the mentality of an English boarding school than anything else. So my introduction to X-Men was sort of the Fox movies, but it had to have come before that because I knew who the characters were before the Fox movies. I don't know how. I think just through osmosis of culture, I knew who the main characters were. But that was my main introduction to it as a cohesive storyline. And then after that, then once I was an adult, I started like learning more about it, and then honestly used like the Marvel Wiki to do a lot of background information, like who is this and what do they do? I was like, oh, okay, cool. And then I actually watched the animated series once this show that came up, something that I was involved in, and they said, great, here's a list of all the Magneto episodes, at least go and watch those. And I went, if my homework is watching 5 seasons of an animated show, okay, it's my job. Sorry, I got to do it. So that was where I got a more fluid and more comprehensive background in this particular world. That's similar to Holly. If somebody challenges me, I just go, I don't know.
Yeah, I think I would have the same feelings about that if that was my homework. Oh, I have to play a video
It's
game?
tough.
Oh, I have to watch a cartoon. Darn.
Yeah. Yeah. Usually, if somebody asks me something specific, I just point at AJ and go, "You talk."
Right.
Yeah, AJ is really into it.
Yes.
So actually, it's funny. I have another version of the "How was your audition process?" And we've already kind of discussed that a little bit. But what really kind of fully inspired you to find the way that you portray, like, other than trying to match anything from the previous version, is there anything really specific that you think of that gets you into your role, gets you into character?
Not in the audition process, but after recording some episodes, they kind of at the start of the process were like, listen, especially with Jubilee, because she was the audience proxy in the original, and like of a certain age and stuff like that. And so in this one, she's turning 18 over the course of the show. Things are changing. She's maturing. The audience has grown 30, with the show, and so there was some. we were called upon to sort of like layer in some other stuff going on with Jubilee, like a little bit of the maturity. We don't want her to sound like it's been 30 years, but you know, like those 3 years between like 15 and 18 are pretty monumental compared to like the 3 years between, I don't know, 25 and 28, you know? So, so I think it was with that in mind, and then, you know, they didn't reveal too, excuse me, they didn't reveal too much to even me about what was going to happen to her like over the course of those 10 episodes. But I feel like that ended up coming through from like, you know, where she is in animated series versus where she is in X-Men X7, but also where she is X-Men X7 episode 1 versus episode 10. There's a lot of evolution that happens over there, over the course of that amount of time.
So I'm lazy inherently, and I came upon sort of a hook actually in the audition process, in the callbacks, when I was sort of sitting going, okay, because the way it worked was we got the packets, we submitted auditions, and then we got a phone call saying, hey, as the callback, we want to do like a trial record of an episode. And in my case, it was episode 2 because I had like one line at the very end of episode 1. So like episode 1 would have been easy. It would have taken no time at all. You know, episode 2, especially with the whole UN thing. And so sitting in my studio right before I sort of logged on going like, okay, I need to have a handle on the voice that came before. And so I had like the 4 or 5 clips from the animated series that they'd sent. And there was one clip that they had sent that had Magneto actually quoting, sort of paraphrasing Shakespeare to the X-Men, and that actually was quoting Miranda from The Tempest. And so like, and for some reason, for whatever reason, that line, which was, "Oh brave new world that has such people in it," and for some reason that line, as I was going through, I'm like, oh, if I do that, and sort of do that and listen to that and go back and forth and just do a call and repeat with David a few times, then I can kind of keep the voice in my head. And so that kind of became for my sort of quick entry into the voice for every session that I did. It's funny because in one of these later on, I heard Ray, who does Cyclops, he had a similar thing, although his is funnier because there's a super of Cyclops just going, G! And like, I remember we were at dinner with my wife and I, and Meredith Lane, who's our incredible director, and her husband, and Ray and his wife. And Ray's wife was like, yeah, I know when Ray is doing an X-Men session because I just hear like him and the video just back and forth, just screaming G at each other for like 5 minutes from the booth.
That's the,
She's like, that's how I know it's an X-Men one, yeah.
2 things of trivia. So Dana,
Yes.
So one of our exec producers and one of the like guardian angels of our show, as a hobby, she does embroidery,
Right.
and she embroidered a bunch of like Cyclops heads on denim, just going jeans. And I will add that before I have a session, especially if it's been a while since the last session, just to get back in the headspace while I'm like getting ready to leave the house, I'll just put on some X-Men, you know, in the background. But the thing is that if I were to play my own episodes just to hear where I was,
Right.
then it kind of becomes like, if I'm a little bit different from that and a little bit different from that, then it's like a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy. So I always listen to animated series before I go back into the session.
Yeah, no, I'm similar. Like, a lot of the time they'll say, well, we'll play you something to get you back in, and usually it's me. I'm like,
Right.
don't play me.
Right,
I'm not a good
right,
reference for me. So yeah, it's the same. It's listening to the voice from the animated series, because then if I go off a little bit,
Right,
what I've done, I'm still
within the radius.
Yeah.
So, what does the fact that you've been given your character, Magneto and Jubilee, what does that mean to you? What does playing that character mean to you?
Okay. One of the most interesting things for me that's come out of doing this show, which I will freely confess was not something that I was expecting going in as boring, like, straight middle-class white guy as you can get, has been, in the last year, and it's been just about a year since I've been doing appearances and conventions, starting with the very first one I did, it was in Calgary that I'd never been to before, and one of the things I've learned about Calgary is it's sort of the Dallas of Canada, in that it's at the foot of the Rockies, and so it's either oil and gas or cowboys. was the number of people at that show and at subsequent shows who've come up to talk to me about how watching the show, specifically frequently watching the show with family members who they had been having issues with because of who they are as a person, how being able to sit and watch the show enabled them to have conversations with people who they were close to but who they have not been able to have a relationship with, has allowed them to have those conversations because people do not feel like they are being specifically targeted. Similar to the way that Star Trek was, addressing race issues by saying, okay, well, if we make everybody aliens and nobody feels like they're being targeted personally. It was kind of a similar thing that I had a lot of kids come up and say, hey, I was able to actually sit and watch this show with my dad, my uncle, my grandfather, my grandmother, whoever, who had watched it before, and this was a thing that they wanted to watch, and we sat and watched with them, and it actually gave them an ability to start seeing how I am having to deal with the world and things I'm having to interact with. And that's been amazing, because that, like I said, I've been really lucky. That's not a thing that I've had to deal with in my life. And having all these people come up and say, this is a thing that I deal with every day, and this show has helped me to have these conversations and has helped me to connect with some people who I am close to, but I've been pulled away from, has been really, really cool. And that is not something that I assumed or thought going in would happen, but that's probably been the thing about doing the show, and specifically, especially about doing Magneto in this first season, because he is such an avatar for that experience, and an avatar for somebody from a group who has been persecuted twice over in his case, but who is like, fuck no. Of all the people on this planet, I'm one of the ones who can be like, when I was 13, there wasn't much I can do. Now there is, and for being a character like him who, to use modern parlance, could pass, like he could walk around the world as a human and nobody would bother him and nobody would know, but for a character like that to say, but it's not okay what is happening to, for example, the Morlocks. And that's one of the things that I love about this show, is that not all of the mutants have like superpowers. Some of them are just different and are not able to hide that they're different. And like a lot of the Morlocks are in this like unfortunate position where everybody knows they're mutant, but their mutation does not allow them to protect themselves. And so to have a character like Eric, who's like, I'm not going to let that happen if it's in any way, shape, or form something that I can do, has been really, really cool. And then to have people come and talk to me about how that has impacted them has been amazing. So that's kind of the impact of, that has been an unexpected, but probably the best result for me personally, selfishly, for having got to work on this show and this character in particular.
It's funny that you say that Eric is a specifically persecuted twice over, because I feel like in each different way, every single character is persecuted at least 2 times over.
Sure.
Because you have the non-white mutants, you have blue mutants, you have wheelchair using mutants, you have there's some variety of having to make your way through this world and being a metaphor. But the thing is that what's crazy to me is that even though Mutants and X-Men is a property that is specifically apt for that kind of dialogue, kind of like every project is related in a way. Because I'm thinking back to conversations that were had when Players came out, because so many people who were into esports would come up to us and say parents too were this enabled me to talk to my kid who's really into League of Legends, or who's really into whatever, in a way that they didn't get. They couldn't have a conversation about over video game properties and stuff like that. And it's just sort of storytelling in general, acting in general. That is kind of your job, is to make every project relatable in that way, or useful. And so, the number of people that come up to me ugly crying, right, because of what Jubilee means to them. And I might do that while I talk. But you probably don't need me to explain it, but positive representation of Asian peoples, and particularly Asian Americans, was not extant in the 90s. And so this character who was Chinese American, or who was adopted, 3-4 times over, how are you persecuted? Because you're younger, but but she's Chinese American, but also that's not the defining characteristic of her character. She just is, and then she gets to do other cool stuff. So just existing in these stories, you know, the story is about other things, but just by existing and populating this world, it's about that too. And that work is done without having to filter everything about that character through their race, their ableness, or anyway, it's very important to me, even though she wasn't my favorite character.
I was kind of a big Rogue fan myself.
Yeah, right?
I love Jubilee because I love the colors.
Yeah.
And I'm being an 80s kid, like I was into all the neons and sparkles. And,
Yeah.
you know. So a little bit more general to your careers. What led both of you, or each of you, I should say, into getting into the career of voiceover?
Literally X-Men 97. Sorry, X-Men the animated series. And in particular, like Lenore Zann and it was all about her. It was like, you know, this switch flipped in my brain. Like, that's a job, that's what I want to do. That, you know, Kevin Conroy, who else? Like, that era was a pretty golden age for, like, comics and parties. And I think also, I think my age, like, falls over certain years where, like, right when anime was starting to come over. So when it was Dragon Ball Z and Brian Drummond as Vegeta, that also was like, huh. You know, just certain performance, and Jennifer Hale as Felicia Hardy in Spider-Man the Animated Series, and Christopher Daniel Barnes in Spider-Man the Animated Series. Particular performances that like just sort of like clicked something in my brain as like that's aspirational. Like I'd like to achieve that level of like storytelling.
I have a good sounding version. I also have, to quote the immortal Yogurt, the search for more money. Theater doesn't pay great, and voiceover is always something which I had been aware of and that I thought would be great. I didn't know enough about it. And so once I was working in New York and theater-wise, and I started getting sent up for voiceover, and then I got working more and more and more, and eventually I went, well, when I walk into a stage audition or an on-camera audition, this is how I look. And unless someone is intending on putting a bunch of prosthetics on me, this is how I look, and so that's the stuff you audition for. In voiceover, I can do anything. I can get to do anything that I can, you know, I send an audition in, and if it sounds like the thing, then, you know, I have a chance of doing that. And so I started, you know, that sort of drew me more to that side. But then the more creative version of it is that I spent my entire time growing up going to sleep listening to old radio shows of an English radio show from the 70s called The Goon Show, and that was Peter Sellers, Harry Seacombe, and Spike Milligan. And the way that they did it was effectively like a rep company. So Harry Seacombe always kind of played a version of himself, and then Peter Sellers and Spike Milligan each had about probably about 10 or 12 characters that they did, and every episode was completely self-sustaining and was a completely different story, and all the characters were the same names but doing completely different things. So it was like a rep company. And so that's what I would go to sleep listening to for years. And I think that kind of had such a great effect on my brain of being like, yeah, you can just be a fool for money. Like, you can be a fool, and that's a job. And you get to be creative, and you get to tell stories, and you get to pick things that are interesting to you and find a way to make them interesting to other people. And so I think without it ever seeming like that's what I was preparing for, that was what I just did as interest that I think has helped now with, you know, kind of what I do.
I do want to add something that you say about like, you know, the idea that in voiceover it doesn't matter what you look like.
Sure.
I will say that even in voiceover, people's brains need more opening up than you would think. Because I have had, actually, like I went in early on, it's better now, it's, you know, 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, you know. But there was an audition where I went in and, you know, when I was just trying to get in the door with voiceover wise, you go to like these pay-play things where you like meet 10 agents or meet, you know, so and so. And the only ones who would freelance were people who clearly had shoved me in their Asian pile, because then I would get called only for like, oh, Chinese accent or Asian accent, whatever that means, and or Chinese language or something, which I can't. But there was I think it was a commercial casting director who, like, I went in, we were chatting beforehand, and he was like, oh, cool, I just, I haven't seen you before, so I'd just like to meet you. It's like, oh, cool, well, can I send you my demo? And he was like, he literally did this. He's like, this is so specific, it's just never gonna come up again. So, like, great, I'm glad you've met everybody you need to meet for every other job on Earth that's not, Asian, for Asian purposes. So, I wouldn't say it's like controversy, but every now and then I do get somebody coming up being like, so how do you feel about forced diversity? So, I'm like, well, how do you think I feel about it? Like, I wouldn't have my job otherwise, So just to note, it's not the egalitarian landscape that we would hope it would be. There's still, it still does take deliberate effort to make it an even playing field, an even landscape.
So we're about halfway through, so let's open it up to our audience for Q&A. What we'd like you guys to do, if you have a question, our lovely microphone handler over here, you can start lining up with her, and then you gotta go that way towards the wall, and then back towards the back of the room. All right, so if anybody has a question, feel free to come up to her. She'll have a mic for you. That question? All right.
There we go. Perfect.
Woo-hoo. Okay.
Has there ever been a role that you wish you didn't get?
Oh, I mean, any actor has like a million of them.
Well, there have been ones that didn't come. Well, so for example, I did a show called Troll Hunters, which is a Guillermo del Toro show, and it was the first show in like a 3-show like world. And I came in for something they brought me in to read for something for the second one that was in Three Below, and in the end they cast Nick Offerman, and my response was, well, I would cast Nick Offerman too. I would cast me. I would cast, if any chance to work with him, you should cast him. But if you had cast me and then I found out you turned him down for me, I would have been mad at you. So there are things like that, and then there are other things that sort of come out and you go, I liked what I did better for that, but I get why they chose that. And there's other things where they come out and you're like, all right. The reality is, for me, anytime there was something I really wanted to get and it didn't happen, and then I saw what happened, it was either, oh, they wanted something totally different, or the other times it's been like, oh, they were able to get somebody who literally brought more eyeballs to the thing, and I'm like, it's a business, and I get that, that's fair. So there have been a couple, but it's honestly also I am lucky in that I get to audition for a lot. And so, because of the time that both video games and animation take, we often don't know what the hell it is we're auditioning for.
Yeah.
And so when something comes out later, it'll sometimes be out for 6 months before I realize, oh, that was the thing I auditioned for that I didn't get. Oh, okay. And by then it's been 2 years, and so you kind of got over it, even if you were disappointed. But it happens all the time. I mean, I probably send in, I don't know, 20 or 30 auditions a week across everything, across like commercials and everything, and if you're lucky, if you've got a month. So I don't get way more. Thank you.
I think, just to answer that part of it, yes, and there's like every flavor of not getting rolled. There are ones where they're like, yeah, I was never gonna do that, so like fair play, or like no, something whatever, or if it's not a voiceover role, then like, well, I was never gonna be taller than I am, so there's nothing to do about that. Things that have nothing to do with you. I feel like how badly I feel about it depends on how much I'm booking otherwise. If nothing's going on and like I had 3 auditions, then I'm real sad that I can book those things. If I'm like, I'm a Charmin bear. I'm okay with like, you know, like, oh, I lost that cereal thing. Oh well, I'll live, you know. There was, it's a role that I got, but the show didn't go. I was in a pilot for, if this show had gone, I would have starred, series lead, in an ABC sitcom about an Asian American family. I did the pilot, show didn't get picked up. That's, you know, that's sad. But then, you know, even though you can't really point to anything like, great, I booked that role, you can't, it doesn't really do that much for you. So like, you know, it's that thing of like, at least I got it, yay! I'm back to the drawing board because you can't really, you know, it doesn't catapult me forward, you know.
Hi, so with a lot of recognizable franchises, you tend to see a lot of actors sort of take over the character across multiple like mediums, especially with comic book characters, like Mark Hamill, Kevin Conroy. So do you plan or hope to do that with like Magneto and Jubilee, like kind of like be the face of them for like games or anything like that in the future?
I mean, I think because I didn't originate this role, I feel like, and because the person with whom I share the role, they're still with us, which is not the case with every person who's in the cast. But we're already like part of a family of people who have portrayed this character, like I feel like that only makes it more rich. You know, it's kind of like. You know, you say that comic book characters are especially prone to being like to having different versions, but like we're both from theater, so like how many people have played their version of Hamlet or their version of like you know, it's these canon characters that you get to be part of that character's legacy, as opposed to like me defining what that character is.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of feel similar was when I was talking earlier on with Gwen actually about like I've had a bunch of people in the last few months come up and either say, wait, are you Magneto in Marvel Rivals, or why aren't you Magneto in Marvel Rivals? And I'm like, because it's James Arnold Taylor, who's incredible, and who played Magneto before me in an animated show or video game, I don't remember which, but like, there have been, in addition to the live action ones, you know, Madonna Fassbender and David Hemblum, who did it in the animated series, there are like 6 other people who played Magneto, including James Arnold Taylor and a whole bunch of other people. So I'm one of them, and I will take any version of work as Magneto that I can get that makes sense because I love playing the character. But it's not mine. I don't know. There have been a couple of characters that I on shows and things that I originated, and 1 or 2 that I actually had a hand in sort of molding who they were, and I feel more ownership of those, but I still don't own them. And my wife has played Wonder Woman on a show, and there's a bunch of people who play Wonder Woman, and it's always been a thing of like, no, this is something that we share, like Holly said, and also it is setting yourself up for disappointment if you're going to start getting upset if somebody else gets. Look, if I get replaced in X-Men '97 by somebody else's Magneto, that'll hurt. But also, I don't own it, and you are setting yourself up to be really upset about something you have no control over because it's not your call.
The thing too about it being a big tent is that like that's why we get so many great versions of like, you know, Deadpool and Wolverine without the idea of the multiverse and different versions is like that is not as nearly as fun without like, Henry Cavill, that's what happened to him, you know, like that's I feel like comic book properties also lend themselves specifically to that.
Actually, I do have a question for Harley. Speaking of Marvel Rivals from earlier, I'm keeping a lot of track on the updates. Will you be voicing Jubilee for her character Marvel Rivals coming up?
Nobody has reached out to me about it, so I don't know. But as we say, we audition for stuff, we don't know what it is all the time, so who knows? No idea.
I promise you that I'm not a fake fan. I have not watched the last episode of X-Men '97.
Just save it.
I just want to know, is there talk about another season? Like, I didn't know X-Men '97 existed until I saw you as guests at Zenkaikon.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Have you heard any buzz?
There's definitely a season 2, that's announced.
Well, actually, and we know it's been announced that we're doing 3.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
cool. So at least 2 more, buddy.
Breaking news, guys.
No, we know we're doing. We know we are doing 3 seasons. We don't know anything beyond that. Nobody tells us.
Like, we don't even know if we're in them. We don't.
Yeah. But they announced season 2 like right. They announced season 2 that we were doing season 2 right around when the show premiered, which was great because they don't usually give you that much heads up. And then only maybe like 6 weeks after the premiere, they were like, okay, we're also going to do the season 3.
See, I didn't really know if that was real because internet stuff will say like, oh, it's officially announced. I'm like, says who? Nobody reached out to me about a contract. Like,
I've said it enough that if it wasn't released, I would have got a phone call from. So yeah, I know that it was officially announced. So we know that the show is going to go through at least 3 seasons. Nobody knows anything beyond
right.
that.
And how many episodes are in those seasons?
Yeah.
We don't know.
We don't know.
You don't know if you're hired yet?
They don't tell us nothing.
I think if this should have been one of the first things that Marvel Studios did, it might be different. But without naming names, Tom Holland, Mark Ruffalo, I think they learned not to tell actors because some actors get really excited, or also are like, I don't care about the NDAs because it's like, because like there are very strict NDAs.
Yeah. So like, if we knew, we couldn't tell you anyway.
Yeah.
But also, we don't know because things can change. What's the point of telling us if they're just gonna like
And it
change it
changes.
anyway? We don't know.
Yeah, and then we're disappointed, and I spend enough time crying to them about things, so they're like, we don't need to hear him whine anymore. But yes, we do have 3 seasons.
It's the squeaky wheel that gets the grease.
The squeaky wheel that gets replaced at orders.
Yeah.
There is that other, yeah.
I will say, if you didn't know that X-Men 97 existed before until like you saw the announcement for Zenkaikon and you got all the way 1 through 9, good on you. You really did your homework hard.
You committed.
Since you both have experience both doing voice acting as well as live acting and theater and stuff, do you find it easier or harder maybe to act off of people or when you're in the sound booth alone?
I think it's always easier off of people. I actually learned on the first, the Del Toro show I did, the first one, because of the cast of that show was all kind of like movie stars, they were never getting everybody in a room together. So that was where that was the first experience of having to go, oh, I'm just acting off of what like the director is sort of reading back to me. And then the important part of that I was lucky that I was able to learn because I was never going to question those, the people who had been at Pixar, who had been at DreamWorks or Guillermo, and those people is, if they would say, that was great, but I need you to do it differently because of something that we're going to do or something the other person has done or we're going to have them do, you just have to trust them. And that can be difficult. That's a thing that you have to just decide you're going to trust the people you're working with. And that happens in this show because we don't record together most of the time. So and fortunately our director Meredith.
We have the most amazing voice director.
Yeah, she's great. And so when she reads with us, or if she gives you an adjustment and it says like, what you're doing is great, this is how we need it to go because this is what we know from production or what I know from either what the other actor has done or I know what I'm going to get out of her, which she can do because she's so good at what she does. It becomes easier at this point to just go like, great, I can trust you.
Yes.
But it is always easier, and it would be really fun to get, it's a big cost, but to get everybody in a room to record off of each other.
They would never get anything done.
They would never get anything done. But it would be fun. I've only ever got to do that on one thing, and it was a blast. But it just doesn't happen as much now. Also, it's just, for the engineers, it's a nightmare to try and cut sounds out. They can do it, but it's more work.
I would say, I wouldn't necessarily say easier or harder. It's just different medium to medium, and just calls for a different set of skills. In some ways, like if the finished product, if you're gonna see my face, then it's helpful to have a different, the other person to act off of. We know this from 1,000 self-tapes at this point. But if it's voiceover and the final product is going to have the input of like storyboard artists and animation and all these other people who are going to turn it into something completely different than what I'm doing in the booth, I wouldn't say it's like easier or harder, but I would say it depends very much on that's when you need an excellent voice director who can who knows what you're asking. You ask it just like it's like the communication level. Like sometimes depending on who you're being directed by, if you ask a question in a session and they answer a question that you weren't asking, it's a little hard. But like the brilliant thing about Meredith Lane is just she's been doing this for so many years and she's so brilliant that like she knows what you're asking and she knows how to answer you in a way that you understand. You couldn't ask for a more ideal sort of working system process.
Your backgrounds in theater, do you guys have a favorite really niche show or role that you have done that like has
in theater or in
theater specifically?
You'll think.
Yeah.
One that leaps to mind is there was a play called B7 Sicknesses. It was a downtown, all the weird stuff's downtown in New York, but it was a play, and it was a 5-hour-long sort of whole immersive evening. And so the written text was an adaptation of all 7 of Sophocles' surviving plays, and written by Sean Graney. And so there was like the Oedipus cycle, and then so I played the blind seer, Tiresias character, and the whole night was basically like it was an evening with like dinner and drinks and stuff like that. And at intermission, the actors would just come and like serve you dinner and hang out. This director was very much in the play is the party, the event is the thing. It's all like that. But he also his vision at the time. I mean, I'm lazy. I keep my hair just long. The costume designer and I were talking about she's the blind seer, so like maybe it's something like dreads, and it's like the eyes are covered, but only like the mouth to like speak the prophecies and stuff is there. But then the director saw me and was like, he was into this, and then there was another day that we showed him an idea, and he was like, "What do you think about shaving your head?" And so the costume designer and I talked about it, so I buzzed it. And then there was like a shoot for the New York Times the next day, and he saw me and he was like, "Can you bick it?" And so like it was like skin bald with like milky eye contacts and stuff like that. So the images are cool. I feel like how would you know that this ever happened? So like, thank you for that question.
It might not even be recognizable at that point.
Right.
No, I got to do a play that there was a theatre company that I used to work with in New York that did kind of a couple of theatre companies that did like lost plays, and there was one that did one that was called The President, which was it was like a screwball comedy from the 30s, and it was about a CEO who was taking care of his friend's like 17-year-old daughter for the summer, and the day before, and it wasn't just friends, it was like he relied on these people also for like his business, and the day before the parents came back together, she showed up, she rolled up and was like, "By the way, I'm pregnant by this communist cab driver who I just met." And so he decides like, I have 12 hours to turn this big dumb guy into like an executive who is admissible, and so like went through everything while he's trying to run his company. And I got to be the big dumb cab driver, which was really fun. But again, like Ollie said, that's not a play that anybody owns, because the whole point of that company is finding things that haven't been produced much. And that's a hit and miss prospect. Sometimes there's a reason plays something. This one was actually funny and was actually good. And so that was kind of really fun to get to do a thing where the whole point of the show is like you take this person from looking like the character from The View from the Bridge, like this cab driver from like the 30s, and turn him into, looking like a Cary Grant character by the end of it. And they've taught him how to say the right things and things like that. And so for at least an hour, he could pass off to the future in-laws as a respectable person. And so everybody signs off on the marriage before they realize, oh, he's an idiot. He's a sweet idiot, but he's an idiot. So that was really fun.
So first off, you guys did really, really amusing. It was a great show. I think one of the biggest things that I noticed with in watching the older show is that they used Shakespearean actors, and I think it created so much of the gravitas of a lot of the characters that, again, you guys did a great job in bringing to life for a second time. I think that what I'm curious about is, like, we hear that you guys have had, like, stage experience and things like that. What, like, did you draw on that a lot for these characters to sort of, like, bring that gravitas, like, that we sort of see in older show?
For me, I would say not consciously. I feel like your whole tool set is always sort of a part of every role. Like whatever you learn to do, I'm taking painting classes, that then becomes part of your whole tool set. Somehow it comes up no matter who you're playing, you know? So in that way, I think that it adds to like the fullness of your bucket to draw from. But no, I would say that it was still the Saturday morning cartoon that I was, using as like a North Star.
I mean, I've already said that I literally pulled the line of Shakespeare to use. So, and I will also say that, as we talked about, because we recorded solo, I had a good chunk of time after we started recording, and when I say good chunk of time, months and months, where I did have this subtext in my head was, this is a very dramatic and Shakespearean kind of character, and the way I'm doing it is this feels very much Shakespearean in that. Am I going to look absurd? Am I screwing this up? Because a lot of the other stuff that I've watched is much more grounded. And then when I first started seeing clips from the show as we were doing ADR, I would see things, I'm like, everyone else looks grounded. Am I totally ballsing this up? And it wasn't until I saw a clip that had Storm in it. But Storm is the other character that is very sort of Shakespearean in how she talks. And I went, oh, Allison can make it work. So this can work. So if it doesn't work, it's me. It's not, I'm not, like, what I'm trying to do isn't the wrong idea. If it doesn't work, it's just me screwing up. And that I can handle, because then that's just me deciding to, that's just me either having faith in the theater training and the theater experience I had or not. But I will freely admit, and I've said it a number of times before, that seeing Allison's work in context with other characters was what took that sort of underlying fear of like, am I creating a character that is in a totally different show from everybody else? Because the way he was written and the way he always has been is more sort of stage-like, it's more sort of grandiose, which makes sense for the character, but it doesn't always. You have to rely a lot on the writing and how they're putting the show together to make that work in a grounded way. And they did.
Trust them.
Yeah.
That's not always the case. You don't always get that.
No.
They're like leaving you out in space.
Yeah. Or in this case, put you in space.
Yeah.
It's not gonna work. It's like, this is how we make it work. We put you a mile and a half in the air.
Right.
Like, well, that is kind of presentation. Yeah.
I will add one thing, is that, as part of that, like, full toolbox, etc. Some of the technical aspects, like some of the technical training that comes with doing Shakespeare is, I do apply to like voiceover, like if you're having trouble saying this one phrase, it's like, oh, it's because this consonant follows this thing, so here's what I can do to sort of, etc.
Yeah, I mean, you're bang on even if you're playing an incredibly like motor character, it'll feed it.
I came into the panel a little bit late, so if this question has already been asked, I do apologize in advance. We all know X-Men is pretty politically charged. If you don't think so, you've been watching the show blind. That being said, my question to you does not matter who you voice or anything. With today's political climate, would you consider yourself Team Magneto or Team Xavier?
Not just because I'm I'm always game to fuck shit up.
Magneto was right.
So like, if they'd offered me Xavier, I would have done it. But like, I'm real happy with who I got to play just as an outlet.
I would have said, like, depends on what times we're in, like sometimes, again, full toolbox, use whichever one is going to work in the moment. I would say that, especially recently, Charles's way hasn't really been working. So I'm personally probably kind of team, like, Magneto been right, so like, when are we gonna use some of that?
I will say, like, I have pitched this and probably for good reason. Marvel does not listen to me. Take it seriously. But I did pitch the idea of like, we got to see Eric try Charles's approach in season 1. When we get to see Charles try Eric's? And Marvel was like, read what we said.
Kind of late, so I'm sorry if this has already been asked, but what was your favorite episode of the show? Like either recording wise or like seeing fully, and this is kind of part of the second part, what would be one thing that you want to see in season 2 or season 3?
So the obvious answer for Jubilee is to say like, oh, the Motendo episode. That's the obvious answer, and I do think that it's like rewatchable and fun, and I think you need that, especially before they got punished up episode 5. That being said, I think that there's a reason why episode 5 is all the awards and all of the stuff. It totally deserves them. But you know, who's rewatching that on purpose? So like, you need the one that's like light and fun and not gonna make you like rip your head.
So, I really like episode 7. That's Rose like Vengeance episode. And I love that one because you get to see, and I love episode 5, getting to see what that did to her in episode 7, and how she just kind of goes off the reservation, and then how everybody else kind of comes all together to try and form around it, and then the way you start seeing them try and work their way through what the rest of this whole conflict is going to be, and how can they work together? Is there a solution? How does it work? What do we do when one of our most powerful members is just on a friggin' vengeance path? Like, what do you like? I love that episode. I think it's great.
We need that catharsis theatrical terms again, but like, we need that catharsis because you can't just, that's her letting loose and that's us emotionally getting to like to be with her on that journey.
Yeah.
I will also say that the other plot line going on, I'm not sure if it's in that, I'm pretty sure it's in episode 7, but it's also when Roberto and Jubilee go to meet Roberto's mom, and I think that's a hugely important sense.
Yeah, that's sometimes I don't remember which episodes are like.
It takes place over the course of a couple of episodes.
Yeah, and stuff got moved. Like there would be stuff that we would record that came in like this was recorded under episode 6, and then when they start putting it together, like this actually works better with this and this, and so like you don't like I don't always remember what episode we were. So.
And the second part of the question was is there something you'd like to see in the future?
Oh right. What I'd love to see. Gosh, I feel like there's nothing that I can say that's going to be better than what our amazing writers and stuff are already coming up with. Although I want to see what you said is struggle.
Yeah, I mean, I would love, and as I said, like the response was, what? But like, and there was an argument to be made that if Charles is all of a sudden going Eric's way, then he stops them. The two of them are both like, yeah, screw you all, then the planet's kind of done. Like, I guess Phoenix could maybe, but it starts getting real tough. Then it's like, okay, well, who are the worst other people? It's like, do you then have to bring in Apocalypse?
Right.
Like, what do you do? If Eric and Charles are like, screw you all, we're ending this thing, and like one shuts off everyone's brains, the other one, like, what do you do? So, yeah, that does create that in my head. And again, this is all just me sitting daydreaming. I'm like, that would be kind of fun to see the rest of the X-Men, and then like all of the other like antagonists have to be like, no, those two are going to end everything. We all need to do something. But again, the response was, thanks for your input.
All right, we've got 5 minutes left and 3 people. Should we do speed round or should we do speed round? Come on.
This is a real quick question anyway. Favorite line from your characters?
Game over, Sleazoid.
Do not make me let you down.
So this isn't so much of a question, but this was that kind of came to me when you brought up about Charles doing stuff Magneto's way. I don't know if you guys know who Onslaught is.
Yeah.
But maybe your writers might be doing that.
Honestly, this is as I said, like they don't tell us anything.
Yeah.
Because they're like, you may just say stuff.
And the writers would probably say the same thing because I'm sure they're like, we pitched all this stuff, and then Marvel was like, no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do not make me let you down.
This is a real quick question. Anyway. Favorite line from your characters?
Favorite line from your characters.
This is a real quick question. Anyway.
kind of in the spirit of it being the speed round, I know you had both mentioned that you've done work on like commercials before. What is that like? And I guess for Matthew, was your work on Doom Eternal like anything like that? Because you have like 3 lines in that game.
So, I mean, commercial stuff it depends, because sometimes if you're a narrator, it's you know, very sort of, it sounds like a radio DJ. It's, you know.
There's a big trend though of like on a breakdown, you'll see not announcery, you know, natural, etc.
They want it to be, they want it to be conversational, unless, and usually you only hear the announcer thing of like the idea of like an 80s or 70s radio DJ if they're kind of making fun of that. So with radio, or with commercial, a lot of the time it's not dissimilar from animation now because they want it to sound like a conversation between real human beings. In terms of Doom Eternal, the funny thing about that was I didn't know what I'd been doing because they don't tell you anything. So I actually got halfway through the session for that, and then at the break, two of the developers said, "Hey, can we take a photo?" And I went, "Absolutely. Why are we doing this?" And they said, "Oh, we've never had this character have a voice before." And I said, "Who are we? Has never had a voice before?" And they said, "Oh, this is for Doom." And I said, "Right, but who?" They said, "No, the Doomslayer." And I'm like, I remember in boarding school, the rich kids who had, you know, grayscale 46-inch laptops who had, you know, that Doom Wolfenstein, those were player shit. I'm like, that character? They're like, yeah, he's never spoken before. Which would be weird to have him suddenly become Deadpool or Iron Man and just throwing off one-liners. So that was one where they're like, so we recorded maybe 10 or 12 lines, and I think they only used like 4 or 5 of actual lines, and then like all the efforts and things like that. But that was really cool and also terrifying. I was glad they didn't tell me what I was doing until after I'd done it, because then I would have been like, well, I have to make him sound this or that. They're like, no, we want what you did. But I know, like when I auditioned for it, I had no idea. They just gave me a breakdown that I'm sure was some version of like 3 or 4 different characters that do a little more talking, but are still rather stoic. And they're like, it's like that, but also he's insane. So,
video games especially is one field. And like each genre is pretty different, the working way. But like video games, like especially, are famously like they give you nothing. You get your lines cold, like reading off the screen when you're in the session. They don't even give it to you like the morning of to like prepare. They don't tell you what character you're playing until you walk in. Like a lot of the time. So you're just completely like, you don't know how many lines you have, you don't know how extensive you don't know if it's one line and you're done. Like they just don't tell you. Commercials, it's so funny because like it could be, you know, you're the announcer, you're a brand name, you're recurring across commercials, or like one of my first commercials was like, there's a Marshawn Lynch Subway commercial where he gets in a tire and like rolls away. All that they had me say was, "Hey Marshawn," because like he says hi to somebody that I didn't play. I think they just said, it's weird that she doesn't say anything back, let's just hire somebody. And that was like, I lived off that money for a year.
I will say though, like as Ellie was saying with video games, two of my wife's brothers are in the military and are like the fancy secretive stuff. They have more freedom to talk about what they do than we do for video games.
Also, there's a SAG strike on right now, you guys. Just like look up Game Performance Matters to see the specifics of that. I don't know.
So like that like yes. So it's speaking to what I was saying, like that's how tight video games really are.
Got more questions for them? They'll be at their tables all weekend. Starting today after the panel, officially 4 to 8, but they'll be a little earlier than that. So over at the main area, at the tables all weekend. Come say hi. Thanks for coming out so much.
Thank you guys. Have a great rest of your con.
Great questions, by the way.